You're going to have more energy in your week when you're working with folks that you really enjoy being with.
This episode is sponsored by Therapy Notes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello there, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 333 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and so glad you've joined us. Hope you're having a good week or weekend whenever you're listening to this, and also a good start to the summer as we're recording this. It's the first part of June, and so summer's here. It's hard to believe it's with us already. I've got lots of great things planned for this summer, and really looking forward to being outside finally and just being, and in the outdoors, which I just absolutely love. Looking forward to you hearing from my guest on this particular episode. I was trying to remember if David had been on this. David Sturgess had been on the podcast before. He might have, and I would have to go back and look. But anyway, David is another private practice consultant. David is also a group practice owner in Georgia, and David is also a consultant with the Wise Practice Consulting, which is the group managed and owned by my good friend Whitney Owens, who you hear a lot about. But anyway, David and I talk about some of the mindset changes that people need to go through and need to think about in moving from particularly agency work into starting a practice, and particularly those that are solo practitioners and they're trying to make that move into private practice. One of the things that I've been thinking about this week is I just having come back from the Meet You in Kentucky conference this past week, at least as I'm recording this intro, just a lot of great inspiration. And I'm really, really a big fan of Casey Compton and all the work that she's doing. But one of the things I love about conferences like that is that just the networking we get to do and just the sharing of ideas. And I came away from that conference with just so much more energy and so much more motivation to do some things differently in my practice and that sort of thing. So anyway, I think there's a lot of value in having conferences like that where you really look at dive deep into kind of the business side of running a practice. But one of the things that David and I talk about is just some of the mindset changes that people need to make and think about, particularly around investing in your practice, because I think a lot of times our money mindset holds us back from spending money on things that are going to make us money. And that's also known as return on investment. And the way to think about it is if I were to spend $200 but able to get back $2,000, that's really a no-brainer. That's a good return on my investment. So in thinking about outsourcing and doing things in your practice, rather than just constantly bootstrapping is a good strategy. So David and I kind of dive into that whole topic and ways of thinking about things in running your practice, which I think is a good topic to always revisit. But before we get to my conversation with David, I'd love for you to go over and check out all of the resources we've got over at Practice of Therapy. And if you'll just go to practiceoftherapy.com, you can see all that we've got there. I'm constantly making changes and updating things, and I'm getting ready to do some more overhaul on the website. I've been planning that for a while, but one of the things that I'm really focusing on this year is doing more one-on-one consulting with folks and individual work, and also some work with my the group practice collaborative, or the practice collaborative, not the group practice collaborative, but the practice collaborative that I started, which is just a mastermind style group where we meet every week and we talk about our practices, and we also do little lessons and learning and that sort of thing. And I'm going to be opening up the doors for that here later in June, just so people can enroll in that and take advantage of that community. So stay tuned for more information about that. Also, before we get to my conversation with David, I'd love for you to check out my friend Ashley's online store, Mental Health Wear TN. And if you'll go again to practiceoftherapy.com, you'll see a link there at the top to get you to that online store. And there's just tons of great mental health awareness shirts and bling and swag and all of that kind of thing. If you're looking for gifts for your staff, or you're looking for that perfect LCSW shirt or LMFT shirt, that kind of thing, she's got them there. So be sure and check that out. And also, real quickly, before we get to my conversation with David, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Psychiatric Network, along with some words from our sponsor, Therapy Notes.
Hey there, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins. If you don't know us yet, we're the hosts of the ThinkThink podcast, which bridges the gap between therapists and clients.
The ThinkThink podcast is proudly part of the Psychiatric Podcast Network, focused on helping people live more meaningful and productive lives.
Join us every Wednesday in our engaging, informative conversations and lighthearted humor to help you normalize and demystify therapy for those beginning or continuing their mental health journey.
We discuss everything from understanding styles of therapy to addressing conflict with your counselor, learning about attachment styles, and the fear triangle. We seek to run the gamut of topics to pull back the curtain and empower effective therapy.
If you haven't listened yet, you can find us at shrinkthink.com/podcast and discover other resources, including educational videos and fun swag at our swag shop.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because Therapy Notes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving. Equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. David is a friend, and I've gotten to know David over the years. He actually did some consulting with me early on, and then he's also now gone into consulting with Wise Practice and Whitney Owens, and I just needed to have him back here on the podcast. So welcome back, David.
Thank you.
Yes. So, David, for folks that might not know you, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Well, long time ago, I
Mhm.
worked as a 911 operator for a police department in my area. It was right around 9/11, kind of the year before and after.
Mm.
And in the pursuit of that, got interested in psychology and then went into grad school and got my counseling degree. And so for about 17, 18 years now, I've been doing therapy. I started out in residential treatment facility for child adolescents, and about 11 or so years into that, um, started to feel the bug for private practice and kind of getting out of community mental health and hospital stuff.
Mhm.
So I started to figure out how to do that, and I think that's one aspect of consulting um, that is critical that a lot of people might not understand. But we're trained to be
Mhm.
clinicians. We're not trained to be business owners. And so if you
Right.
don't have the knowledge of small business ownership, you got to figure out, that before you're going to be successful in running a private practice. And so
Right.
about the last year of hospital life, I started to do private practice on the side. And with doing the math with my wife, we figured when I could leave hospital and hit the gas on private practice. And been doing that for a few years now. I actually left officially from the hospital about 9 months before quarantine. So that was a fun little year to start private
Mhm.
practice.
Yeah.
But do a lot of work with responders, a lot of faith based work, and have my practice in Marietta, Georgia. And then I do consulting with Wise Practice Consulting, where I focus primarily on those solo practice owners that are either in transition or they've been in practice for a long time, but they're wanting things to be more profitable and maybe have a different lifestyle, which doesn't necessarily mean more money. It might
Mhm.
be more freedom rather than you want the latest Ferrari, but really understanding what is the lifestyle we want and
Mhm.
what are organizations that we're passionate about that we want to help fund or we want to spend our time in and helping those practice owners get to a point where that can be their reality.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think you and I met around the time that you were making that transition when you had started your practice and then moved or kind of moving and trying to figure out, okay, can I make it full time? And that's a scary time for a lot of people, particularly I know that's kind of how I got into private practice as well. I was working for an agency at the time and started doing a little bit of private practice on the side and
Mhm.
okay, how am I, if I'm going to be able to get the autonomy that I'm looking for with being an owner, what you got to have in place in order to do that. I think one of the things that I wish I had had more of in the beginning stages was more help and mentorship from others. I mean, and I think that's an important piece.
Speaking to our consulting relationship early on, one of the courses that I took from you was the Google Workspace course.
Hmm.
And it was such an economical way to get everything started and organized and that foundation. Also the aspect of, what is the BAA and Google cover and what is it not? Because
Right,
there's a
right.
lot of misunderstanding out there about that one.
Yeah.
And even something as simple as that was so helpful for me, and then the ideas of masterminds and, one-on-one consulting, it is an investment, but it's
Yeah.
invaluable. I mean, the return
Right.
on that investment is exponentially greater than what the investment is.
Well, I know one of the things in your work, David, that you kind of come up with are just kind of some um, key things or key things to be aware of in just your mindset shift. You want to say some more about that? Just what you've learned and really what people need to kind of keep in mind.
While we are helpers and we want to help everyone, you're not going to be able to do that if you can't keep your doors open. And so it's understanding business in the sense of, do you want an insurance based model? Do you want a self pay model? Do you want to try to do a hybrid of those two? what does insurance look like in terms of liability insurance, slip and fall insurance, taxes? How do we get those write-offs? I think also the idea of business ownership, a lot of people don't have that identity. We're great clinicians, but the idea of I have a business, and that requires you think differently from a return on investment standpoint, where our time and our money are very much the same. And so an example I always use with folks is, how much does it cost to have somebody cut my grass for me versus how much can I make in maybe that 2 hours of cutting grass, right? That's a return on investment type of business mindset. So in three ways of kind of shifting from therapist to business owner, it's changing the way you think about getting help, and then changing the way you think about money and time, and then change the way you think about marketing in terms of a niche population. And we are human. We've got things from our past that come up in terms of money issues. Maybe it's a scarcity mindset because of things from childhood. Maybe we feel guilty, for the sacrifices having to be made when we have a family, things of that nature. But then just the humility of, we don't know what we don't know. And it can be intimidating. I remember looking at people like you and Whitney and a couple of other folks that you and I are close to, and just like, oh my gosh, it was almost starstruck, right? And I can't ask them that question, kind of thing. But then it was like, they're the perfect people to ask because they are a few steps ahead of me. They're demonstrating the reality that I want and the competency of getting that done. And so it's a mind shift in terms of not being an annoying burden by asking somebody, or you don't know what you don't know, so just be curious with it.
Right. I think that's so important, in that being able to, as I like to say, give yourself some grace over stuff. And I think we can, mindset things. One thing is the information shaming that we can do to ourselves. Yes. In other words, because we don't know this, we think we're, it leads to that whole imposter syndrome kind of thing. But yeah, and I totally agree. I think it's being curious, and also, like we tell clients and stuff, there are no dumb questions. I mean, it's just getting, and so being able to get around that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I have often found consulting and therapy are very similar, right? As a consultant, we're looking at that big picture of this person in this environment, being a business owner, and what systems need to be implemented that aren't. What are the barriers to those things getting put in place? Is it simply skill teaching, right? Or is it one of those thinking errors, imposter syndrome type of thing, and asking the right questions to challenge that, to help these other therapists, these business owners, again, have that lifestyle that they define. And I think that in the idea of thinking about getting help, another kind of bullet point in that is this kind of idea in the private practice world of, okay, I've started a private practice and now I'm supposed to go build a group practice. And that's not necessary. Right. And so that idea of, I need help being a better solo practice owner is fine.
Right. You have to start with why. Why do you want to be in practice, private practice, and particularly why not work for somebody else, and why not, just be an employee somewhere.
Right.
And I think so. And I think it just takes a clear understanding of, exactly as you talked about already, David, of really being clear about, okay, going into private practice, to what end? What is it that you need from it in order to create the lifestyle that you want to lead for yourself. And I think sometimes, as you also kind of alluded to, we can get caught up in this hamster wheel of I've got to push and I've got to grow and I've got to be this big thing and I've got to do all the stuff. But no, not necessarily. I mean,
Right.
yeah. So having clarity around that is important, I think.
Yeah, and some of the kind of pain points, so to speak, that I see a lot is our folks are not charging enough. They're charging too little for their sessions. And especially as solo practice owners, you're only going to earn as much as the number of sessions in a week, right?
Right.
And there's only so many hours of that as well. And so if you're kind of capping out on what I kind of think from a healthy perspective is that 20, maybe 25 a week, that's a lot of sessions in a week. If you're charging $100 for that, well, there's the max you're going to make, and that's a lot of time for that little bit of money. But when I suggest raise your rates to 150, I in my early years was like, nobody's ever they will, because they do all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
But it's that imposter syndrome, scarcity mentality, and this idea that, well, it's therapy, and so it should cost less than other things, because we're helping people. And I think that changing the way you think about getting help, changing the way you think about money and time, really kind of start to meld together and shift the way we view our business, shift the way we view our time and the way we think about money.
Right. And if you get another thing is that I think for most of us in this field, our kind of one of our biggest goals is we want to help people. And the thing about it is, if we're going to continue to help people, we need to be paid appropriately for the work that we do.
Right.
Because if you're operating in a deficit or not getting what you're worth, then it's going to quickly unravel.
The idea of where and how do we market, that's a skill all in of itself. And we certainly don't learn that in therapy school. I think also knowing your why works into knowing your niche population. Part of my transition from residential treatment to private practice was my oldest was starting to become an adolescent. I did not want to work with psychiatric adolescent population and come home to adolescent population.
Right.
I also had a passion for the first responders, having been one many years ago. And that's a niche in terms of cultural competency that is as unique and specified as working with, I don't know, think about your most culturally diverse, needed cultural competency type of population. There's a million of them out there, right?
Yeah.
Even the idea of some responders are veterans. I've worked with veterans, so I can work with first responders. No, that does not equate. There's a lot of things about the responder community that you have got to be culturally competent on in order to be effective with them. And knowing which populations exhaust you and which populations excite you, I think that can change. And I think a lot of therapists think I've worked with this population forever and I've got to keep working with this population forever. And that's not necessarily true.
Right.
If you found your groove and you love doing art therapy with kids, cool. Have at it, do that for 30 years. And it's okay to change things up a little bit.
Right.
And then learning how to market to find that population. We sometimes have to be creative in the consulting realm,
right.
It's a little more complicated than psychologytoday.com.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's so true. I think, which ties back into kind of your why, I think to some degree, in that once you kind of figure out your niche, a way to figure that out is to figure out, okay, what types of clients energize me rather than deplete me. And I think that's a good thing to pay attention to. And, you actually, we do better therapy and better work with people that we are enjoying being with rather than looking at the client list and saying, oh no, not them today, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of thing. So yeah. So I think it's good to know that about yourself, and that in and of itself helps create the niche for people.
You're going to have more energy in your week when you're working with folks that you really enjoy being with.
So David, one of the things I know we had discussed maybe chatting about are just the systems that you work with people on and getting set up, and particularly in those beginning stages, what is it that's needed in order to make things run smoothly and that sort of thing?
Number one is consulting, right? Going back up to asking, about getting help. A lot of people kind of have some sticker shock with some consulting, packages and services. But again, it's invaluable. Your return on investment is going to be exponentially greater. Having a good EHR is important. There's a lot of EHRs out there that do a lot of great things that charge a whole lot more than what's necessary. But you certainly need an EHR that can do billing of any kind, whether it's self-pay or whether it's insurance-based, having one that incorporates telehealth. The next one is Google Workspace. It does so many great things it's a wonderful platform that can scale and change with you as your practice changes. I would say that the biggest thing with Google Workspace that I've got to slow people down and get them to focus on is that BAA and HIPAA compliance aspect. People think, oh, well, there's a BAA, so I can send emails, I can use Google Voice, and it's all covered under that HIPAA, BAA.
Right.
And that's not what Google Workspace BAA covers, is everything within the account. So the second you send an email, it's not encrypted. Google Voice, is not an encrypted phone service.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to use stuff like that, you've got to account for that.
Yeah, it's one of the things though I've learned recently is that Google Workspace, particularly email, like the Gmail part of Google Workspace, is that they're upping the encryption. Of course, you have to pay a little extra to get the full encryption, end-to-end encryption. But yeah, and it's, I think, too, measuring your own comfort level with all of that is important. I have read here recently, David, that Google Workspace is going to be housed on their platform that full the true end-to-end encryption.
Personally, for me, I like fun, gadgety new things. And there's a package. I want the biggest package.
Right.
The next system is the phone. This is where I really encourage folks to make sure that they understand the HIPAA law and the BAA stuff. So things like Spruce is one that I've gotten turned on to, and it provides that end-to-end encryption texting ability with clients.
Yeah, I've been using phone.com for years. We've been pretty pleased with it. It's not had a lot of problems with it, so that's good.
The next one is kind of ties into that marketing aspect in terms of your website and Google Analytics, your Google My Business. Irregardless of your business model being self-pay or insurance-based, you have got to make sure that your website is not just attractive, but it's functional. And there are key things that need to be above the fold, as the term is. And there's a lot of back end type of stuff when it comes to SEO and backlinks, keywords, things of that nature. And if you want to learn that, wonderful. Learn it, get real good at it, handle it yourself. I do not want to learn it.
Right.
I have zero interest in learning all of it. And so there's a couple of great folks that you and I are very close to that do phenomenal job with website development and SEO. And and Google Analytics. One thing that I know you've talked about and what we talk about too is KPIs, or those key
Mm-hmm.
performance indicators, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have got to have our data. We have got to know who is out there, what are they searching for, what are those keywords that somebody is searching for, what pages on our website are doing well, and all of that shapes from a marketing niche population standpoint. What kind of blogs do we need to write? Because if people are
Mm-hmm.
searching for this in my area, why don't I get some blogs out there on social media and Google My Business and link them directly to my website?
Mm-hmm.
And there is marketing, there is speaking to a pain point of your niche population, and it's all going through your website.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's you doing it, because it can be kind of time costly as well, or that return on investment, you're paying for somebody to do it for you and or with
Right.
you.
Right.
And so that's one of those systems that I think kind of needs to be a higher priority than
Right.
many people
Yeah,
put it.
your website really is, I think in this day and time, really is your front door. And that's how the the vast majority, I know I'll almost go out on a limb and say everybody, when they're looking for a therapist, that's what they're going to do is they're going to go online and that's what they
Right,
go first. Yeah. So it's important to have a website that's functioning well and that ranks well in the Google search.
right. Yeah. It people go to social media for the quotes and
Mm-hmm.
the cool tagline type meme stuff
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to mental health. Um, People do listen to the vlogs and the reels and things like that. They go to Google to search for that therapist, their pain point,
Mm-hmm.
and who's near me. And so,
Right.
I'm not knocking the reels and the memes and stuff like that. I'm not a real kind of person
Huh.
like a couple of our friends are, but the idea of putting that information out there and allowing that to exist out there, people are going to run across it, they're going to save it, they're going to share it with the family friend, the neighbor, things of that nature, and eventually they'll come directly to your website.
Right.
And the last kind of system is some sort of financial management system. And so I'm a big fan of Profit First for therapists.
Yes.
And having something like there's several different, software things like QuickBooks, but Profit First, it again, we don't think of therapists and profit, right?
Right.
But
Right.
without it, our doors do not stay open.
It's so important to really, they hear from all of us all the time, know your numbers. And in order to do that, you've got to have a system in place to track it. And I couldn't agree with you more. Profit first, and then having a QuickBooks or some accounting system that's separate from your clinical accounting. One of the things that I teach is that you really have two financial systems. You have kind of your individual client records and what
Mhm.
they pay you and that sort of thing. And having a good EA like Therapy Notes, who sponsors this podcast,
Yes.
it in place helps you manage the individual client records and the individual client accounting, but a separate accounting system that gets the global practice accounting and looking at the numbers and that sort of thing. You really need kind of both of those systems in place for all of that. And yeah, and then
Absolutely.
having the knowledge about how money works. That's where Profit First comes in. And again, shout out to our friend Julie Harris and her book Profit First for Therapists is a great book, great go-to book to learn that. And then also the original book by Mike McAllowitz, Profit
Right.
First, is two I think two essential reads for anybody that's going into private practice. I think once you get that, it'll put you at ease and you'll feel better about all of that. So, well, David, I know you've got some things coming up. You want to share those about your mastermind group that's going to be starting. And also, we've got the Wise Practice Summit coming in October that we'll both be at. And That'll be a fun event.
I am hosting a webinar on June 18th, and we're going to kind of be going through in a little bit more depth some of the things that we've talked about today. And part of that is going to be focused on kind of when to pull the plug on agency work and transition into growing your faith-based practice. That webinar is Tuesday, June 18th at 1. It is free. And so that'll be a good hour. And then I do have a mastermind that is beginning in July. We're going to meet twice a month between July and December. And this is primarily for solo practice owners that are looking to, again, either they're brand new into owning a practice or they're wanting to evaluate and make some changes in their private practice as well. And so you can go to the website, wisepracticeconsulting.com, and we've got those events on the website. I do have a scheduling link that we'll put in the show notes. I can do 30-minute free consultation intro call and help folks get answers to a couple of questions and learn more about consulting and how it can help them get that success and goal that they're looking for. And then we do have the Wise Practice Summit in October. It's October 3rd through 5th at the Grand Bohemian Hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina. We do have NBCC approved 15 credit hours. And so, your CEs are always something that we're hunting down. And you can learn more about that and register for the summit on wisepracticeconsulting.com's website as well. The program agenda is there. You can buy the ticket there, see the speakers and things like that. Julie will be there with Profit First, selling the book, and quite a few other folks as well.
Right. It's going to be a good conference. A lot of good speakers lined up.
You'll be there as a speaker as well.
Yes, I will be.
Yeah.
I will be. Yes. So glad we had this conversation. It's a good reminder for, regardless of your experience level or how long you've been in the business or just getting started, it's good to kind of hit on some of the basics. And I think we did a pretty thorough job of that in this particular episode. So, David, I'll be seeing you here soon. Well, again, a big thanks to David for being on the podcast. And I hope you found our conversation helpful and just thinking about our mindset and just some of the things, all the things that you need to think about in running a practice. I know there are a lot of folks that listen to the podcast that have been doing this a while, but those of you that are newer, I think this is good advice to listen to. And also for those of us that have been doing it a while, I think it's a good idea to kind of remember these ideas, particularly around, outsourcing and being able to think about the return on your investment and how you're spending your time and what's the best use of your time. I think, as we kind of alluded to, I think a lot of times we're afraid to spend money, or we tell ourselves, oh, I can't afford that. But in many ways, you really can. It's going to cost you more in terms of your time and your ability to scale your practice and grow your practice if you're trying to do it all. So that's a good reminder. I know it's a good reminder for me too, because I have a tendency to want to do too much myself. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm reading that book, 10X is easier than 2X. And that's a reminder for me that I need to think about how to run my practice differently, run it more efficiently, and hand things off, particularly as the owner. And so hopefully you found all this helpful. Do check out the links in the show notes and the show summary for finding out more about David, but also finding out about the Wise Practice Summit coming up in October. I will be there as one of the speakers, and David will be there, along with a lot of other folks you probably know and love if you're in this space. it's a great conference. I know this past year when we met down in Savannah, Georgia, we just had a great time and a lot of great speakers. And then this year's going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Grand Bohemian downtown. So it's a great venue. But Whitney and her crew and her staff do such a great job putting on these events. So be sure and check it out. And also, before you go, be sure and check out our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice, and I absolutely couldn't do without them. They're constantly improving their platform and just adding so many great things, particularly outcome measures is something new that they're adding as part of their platform. And for those of us that are interested in that sort of thing, they're doing a good job of adding to that library. So be sure and check them out, practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes, and use that promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. So take care, folks. I hope that you have a great rest of your week or weekend. Do take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And hope you're having a great start to your summer. Take care, folks. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychiatric network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychiatricnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.